Well, hey guys, it's Darwin, and today I'm going to share some of my top backpacking tips and tricks that I've learned over 8 years and 14,000 miles of hiking. Little things that I've done every single time I go into the backcountry to make my time on trail more enjoyable. Today's video is specifically centered around camp. The little things that I've done over and over and over again throughout the years to make myself more efficient when it comes to selecting a good campsite and setting up my tent and promoting better sleep at night. So the first little tip or trick or hack that I have for you is something I've talked about a lot in the past, something I've shown a lot in my How I Pack My Pack videos, and that is always keeping my tent on top of the inside of my pack. Now, the reason that I do this is because if I get to camp and it is really rainy or it's just bad weather, I know that I can open up my pack and the first thing that I'm gonna be able to grab is my shelter. And then everything else on the inside of my pack that's in my pack liner can stay dry while I set up my tent. As soon as I have my tent set up, I'll crawl into it, put my wet pack in the vestibule, and then I'll start taking out all of my dry items, blowing up my sleeping pad, getting out my quilt, getting out my food. And then the reverse side of that, if the next morning your tent is wet because of rain, or it's just damp because of condensation, I can put everything else inside of my pack in my pack liner. I twist my pack liner, and then I put this on top. Again, making sure that the moisture from this isn't trapped inside the pack liner with the items that I want to keep dry. Then when I stop for a break or for lunch, I can grab this out, I can hang it out and dry it, and then put it back in the pack on top to repeat the process and make sure that everything that I have is as dry as possible when I get to camp. Now, speaking of shelters, when I do get to camp, if I'm not in a crazy hurry because it's raining, how do I find my perfect camp spot? How do I select a camp spot? Now, there's a lot of different things that can factor into this. I'm gonna make sure that I'm not setting too low in a valley to get a lot of condensation. I'm also gonna make sure I'm not setting too high and be exposed in the elements. I don't wanna set up in a bad burn area where I know that things can fall easily, or under a widowmaker branch that could easily fall in my tent while I'm sleeping. So all of those are a factor, but specifically, how do I find a good flat spot? Now, when you're pitching a tent, especially a trekking pole tent, what makes a perfect pitch is always gonna be the flattest spot you can get. So how I go about finding a flat spot is, number one, I'll kind of survey the area and look for a spot that I think that my tent's gonna sit perfectly and flat. Then I'll kick out all the debris because I don't wanna set my tent on top of a pine cone or a twig or anything like that. And then before I even start pitching it, I'll actually lay on top of my tent, completely flat. This way I can make sure that the spot is gonna be flat for my sleeping pad. I'm sure you guys have set up a tent in a spot that you thought was flat, got your sleeping pad in it, only to find out that you were on a little bit of a bump or a root or a rock, and then you start slipping and sliding around on your pad and you don't get that great of sleep. So to be able to make sure I'm getting a good spot, to make sure that my sleeping pad is gonna sit flat, I always lay on top of the tent. And then if I feel like there's a little bump or I'm gonna move one way or another, I'll just simply move my tent around until I get that perfect spot, then I'll pitch it. I'll get a good pitch. My sleeping pad will be flat. I won't be sliding to one end or another, down or up. I get a nice, amazing, perfect night's sleep every single time. The next thing is going to pertain to a specific piece of gear that I've been using for years. I picked up back in 2020, but it has multiple uses on the trail, and specifically 3 that make sure that I get a better night's sleep. And that is one of these 1/8 inch foam pads. Now, this is the Gossamer Gear Thin Light 1/8 inch folded pad. And what I like about this over a traditional sit pad, like I used to use for years, is, well, one, it's light, it's crazy light, but I use it for multiple things throughout the day. So I'll either take it out and use it as a sit pad, all folded up like this to make sure I have a nice amount of cushion. Or if I'm gonna take a nap on the trail, I can completely fold it out and lay on it or stretch on it throughout the day. But then when I get to camp, this has 3 amazing uses to give myself better sleep. The first one is by simply putting this under my inflatable sleeping pad, it stops me from sliding around on my tent floor. I cannot tell you how many people have sent me messages saying, I don't like DCF shelters because the floor is slick and I feel like my sleeping pad slides around a lot. Well, by putting this under your pad, it kind of acts like Velcro. And because it has that tacky feel to it, it makes sure that your pad does not slip around throughout the night. The other thing that it does is it adds a little bit of R value and warmth to your sleeping pad. So if you're using something like an Uberlight, what I use all the time that has a very low R value, by simply putting this under your sleeping pad, it gives yourself a little bit more warmth and a barrier from the cold ground. Again, it's not a lot, but every little bit helps when you're trying to stay warm on a chilly night. And then the last thing that this is great for is just in case when you're kicking out all of those things at your campsite, making sure that you don't have any twigs or pine cones or rocks that can poke through the bottom of your tent and pierce your sleeping pad, this acts as a protective barrier. And yes, I've had it happen on the PCT in 2018. Even though I thought I had a nice clean campsite, there was a pine cone leaf that actually that poked through the bottom of my tent and put a hole in my pad. So this acts as a multiple barrier between the cold, between debris on the ground, and it also keeps your pad from slipping around at night. So an awesome multi piece of gear for the inside of your tent. A couple other little things that I do, and I get questions a lot, is with my glasses. Now, obviously I wear glasses and a lot of people don't, so this might not pertain to you, but when I go to lay down for the night and I take my glasses off, there's always kind of the question, where do I put them? I don't want to put them on the floor of my tent because I don't want to get them scratched. I don't want to accidentally roll over them in the middle of the night and break them. I also am not a big fan of taking them and tucking them away in like a pocket in my pack, because if I got to get up randomly quick in the middle of the night because I got to go to the bathroom or I just have to get out of my tent quickly, yes, I've had to do that, I don't want to go searching for it when I'm disoriented. So what I do is I take my glasses off right before I go to bed and I actually hang them on the zipper pull tab of my door. So most tent doors are gonna have a dual zipper. Now, whether it's a rainbow door or it's an L door or J door, or whatever you wanna call it, I always put my 2 zippers high. That way I can take my glasses and I can hang them right there next to my head. And then when I wake up in the middle of the night or in the morning, it's the first thing that I'm gonna grab before I can even get out of my shelter. It keeps them clean, it keeps them from getting scratched, and I know exactly where they're at every single time. Now, speaking of doors, the other thing that I do is I will keep, if it's a nice night, it's not raining, it's not snowing, and there's not gonna be some crazy storm, I will keep one of my storm doors on my vestibule open, and the one that I keep open is the one by my face. Now, the reason I do this is to mitigate condensation. No matter what tent that you have, DCF, sill poly, single wall, double wall, condensation is a thing that just happens in the backcountry. It's something you can't really avoid. So in order to get better circulation in my tent from the main heat and moisture maker that's in the tent, I always open the storm door and keep it open on my head end. That way, as I'm breathing throughout the night and warm air is escaping not only out of my mouth and my nose, but also out of the top of my quilt, there's ventilation right next to that area, helping to take down condensation issues. Now, the next thing is gonna be my batteries and my water filter. Something I think a lot of people do is they will take their water filter or their batteries and they'll put them in the foot box of their quilt at night to keep them warm from draining or to keep their filter from freezing. If they have water in them and that water gets frozen, it can actually crack the fibers on the inside of the filter. So what I have done for years is I don't just take them and put them in the bottom of my quilt. I do one of two things. When it comes to my batteries, I'll typically, at the end of the night when I'm about to go to bed, I will swap out my socks. I'll take the socks that I were wearing for the day that are maybe kind of a little gross, crusty. I'll put on my extra pair of socks that I've had in the foot box of my quilt. And then the socks that I use throughout the day, I'll actually take my battery out of my camera that I'm carrying. I'll take maybe my extra camera battery and my battery bank, and I'll take them all and I'll put them inside of one of my socks. Now, the reason I do this is for a couple different reasons. One, I don't want all of these little items kind of moving around on my sleeping pad and throughout my quilt in the middle of the night, because one could slip out and it could drain because of the colder temps. So I put them all in a sock. I'll actually twist it. I fold it over, basically creating a little sock diaper. And then with that, my water filter. Now, I don't want to put my water filter inside of my other sock because it could have a little water in it. It could create some condensation and moisture and get my sock wet. So I will always carry an extra little Ziploc bag inside of my ditty bag or my food bag. At the end of the night, I shake out all my water after I'm done filtering. I put it in the Ziploc bag, and I also throw this in the foot box of my quilt, making sure that it doesn't freeze, it doesn't get moisture inside of my foot box. And then these two are there in the morning when I wake up, not drained, not frozen, and I'm good to go. So a little thing that I've always done, the sock diaper trick and the Ziploc bag. And then the last thing that was actually just recently shown to me by my buddy Juice, something he's been doing for years and I've started implementing, is in the morning when I go to break down my tent and I fold it up, I will take out my trekking pole or trekking poles. I usually take out all my stakes and then I'll start rolling my tent up. But what if it's a windy morning? A lot of times the tent can kind of get thrown around, it can unfold while I'm trying to fold it up. It's super annoying. So by simply taking one stake and leaving it in on a corner, it creates a straight line that's taut. So when you go to roll up your tent, you take out all your stakes except for the one, and then you pull it taut, fold it over, and start rolling it towards the stake. Once you get to the stake, you can pop the stake out, fold the tent up, stuff it away, and then voila. An awesome trick to make sure that you can not have to fight and fuss with the tent as it's rolling around in the wind. Thanks, Juice. Awesome trick that I'm gonna start using a lot, actually. So there you guys go. There's some very camp-specific tips and tricks that I've learned throughout all of these years of long distance hiking and backpacking and bike packing and everything else that I've done. Things that I guess I just started doing because they were more efficient at the time, and things that I do every single time out in the backcountry without even thinking about it, that makes myself more efficient on trail and makes me more comfortable at night in camp. Speaking of that, what is something that you do all the time? What's a little tip, a trick, a hack that you use to make yourself more efficient in camp or give yourself better night's sleep? Leave me something down below and let me know your thoughts. Guys, I hope you're doing well. I hope you're taking care of yourselves and each other. I love you, and as always, thanks for watching.